Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The Daily Ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing Super Mario Bros., directed by Annabelle Jangle and Rocky Morton, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang by Shane Black, Moneyball by Bennett Miller, Demonic by Neil Blomkamp, and we have newly released Spencer by Pablo Larraín. So stay tuned and enjoy the show. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Thomas, how's it going?
It's going all right. It's going all right. How's your week of movies, man?
Not the best. Not, I mean, obviously, folks at home, you hear that's a pretty wacky list that Tom just rattled off. Was a decent week in movies. I think we're coming off of a lot of theater releases. So there's a lot I've been watching on the side, and I think I'm excited to give a spotlight to it at least. And give a talk about it.
Okay, well, let's start with something kind of, wacky and weird.
Kind of light. Kind of as light as it comes.
But going back to 1993, it's the Super Mario Brothers movie, and directed by Annabelle Jangle, Rocky Morton. How would it go, man?
So I think crossing everyone's mind, this could probably be the question, why the hell are you watching the very infamous Super Mario Brothers movie? Of course, the news broke semi-recently that Nintendo will be licensing a new Mario Brothers movie with a star-studded cast, Chris Pratt as Mario. Yep. I wanted to give it a shot because I think the Mario Brothers movie was something that everyone pretty much wrote off. It is a very infamous film, and I wanted to give it a shot to see what that kind of era of Nintendo licensing was like. What kind of passing off the IP of Mario looked like back then, and maybe draw some comparison for when the new movie comes out. I've got to be honest here, not too surprised by this film. I was surprised by how I think acceptable as a 90s prop-filled action comedy it was. It definitely wasn't catastrophic to watch on screen, which is what I was kind of expecting, and definitely the legacy of this film. You say this film, this is kind of something that you would even pass in Blockbuster and probably never pick up back in the day.
Yeah. I would say that's one of these movies for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, I wanted to also look at it because, folks, video game movies are terribly bad. I foresee video game movies coming more and more into the mainstream. I think for the success that the Sonic movie had and the recovery, honestly, that it had from very rocky starts, I think Hollywood studios are really going to go ham into this. The fact that Illumination as the animation studio behind the Mario movie, something so in the spotlight right now off of Despicable Me, I think that was something that I wanted to look at the source. What is the first attempt as Mario? And I got to be honest, yes, this holds a candle to why this movie is so hated on. This has laughably so little to do with Mario itself, but I was surprised how much it did kind of work, or at least had a passing grade. You got out with your skin still on of having just kind of a wacky 90s movie. I do not think it was terrible. I think one of the things that this movie gets a lot of flack for is its realistic elements. The fact that the Mario Brothers are plumbers, literally plumbers.
Right, literally.
Literally Brooklyn, literally dinosaurs.
Right.
There's a lot there to unpack, and I think it's the real comedy in this film that both works and what doesn't. I mean, don't get me wrong. When you look at this film and you're expecting Mario and you're expecting Mushroom Kingdom and yada yada, this is tonal whiplash when you have Mario showing up literally with, Catholic Italian stereotypes, gold chain around his neck. It is a little bit much to take in. For me, though, I tried to enjoy this film both as a Mario movie, but both as just kind of going in fresh to this movie. And I think, no joke, this movie, as far as its comedic chops, John Leguizamo and
he was pretty young.
Yeah,
very young.
Very young.
And then we have Bob Hoskins.
They work on screen as a comedy duo. I think if you're going to sell the idea of these are the Mario and Luigi, they are honestly great together on screen. Whether it's funny just because it exists as just like an absurd dressings to this Italian brother type of comedy that quickly goes into a fantasy realm. I was surprised how much I didn't hate this movie, and I really do challenge a lot of people that if you have this notion that this movie is a no-go, no way, the worst of the video game movies, I'm telling you right now, this is not anywhere close to the worst of what a video game movie can be.
Yeah, there's a lot of stinkers out there.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a special.
Oh, don't
Don't
force
me
to.
Sorry, I mentioned it.
Originally there was a plan because there's a new Resident Evil coming out, and originally the plan was to maybe pair that with the old Fifth Element girl.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
She does so many of those Resident Evil.
That's
movies,
right. Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah. That's a perfect example though, because this movie is a good time. Bottom line, wow. I would take this any day of the week over any of those movies.
That's very surprising. Do you think you enjoyed it even a little bit more just because of the surprise that it wasn't bad? You know what I mean?
There could be like a honeymoon phase with that. Honestly,
right.
I think the jokes though they're legitimately funny. I think there's some serious writing chops to making Mario and Luigi likable together on screen. I think where the movie kind of falls apart is where everyone has a gripe with it that, they are talking that Bowser's like part of real dinosaurs and just one of the craziest 90s sets with props and there's this weird electrical system that the Mushroom Kingdom or the city that they go to runs on, and there's like cars, and it's like, oh, this is definitely not Mario, but again, the cornerstone of where I'm coming at with this review is that this movie works as a comedy with some Mario dressings. It definitely doesn't work as a Mario movie.
Right. Okay, that's a good distinction there. Yeah.
And I think returning to a movie like this, over close to 20 years now.
Yeah. 30.
Isn't that what you want out of a movie that probably isn't going to live up either way to the modern Mario dressings of what Mario is and the Mushroom Kingdom and everything like that of the brand.
Right.
This movie stands apart because I think it can hold up as a comedy entirely separate from that, and I think that's something to maybe note. Again, I don't get me wrong, the fact that there is a Mario movie that is just like 8 ways not Mario. It is still enjoyable, and I think was a pleasant surprise for me with a lot of this. I think as far as the concepts here and the callbacks of what this movie can do, this movie, honestly, I was fearful it could have been very Space Jam 2, that it's just like constant. This is not the modern approach that we would see today to a brand movie, any kind of brand, is not present here, and I think also that was refreshing as well to watch in 2021.
Sure.
So, with that in mind, does the humor outside of Mario work? Sure. Does that make it a good reputation of Mario? No, and absolutely not. I think the creative interpretation of Mario and the universe is borderline insane. I think they went in. I think they went in a writer's room and they tried to attach it to real life dinosaurs and real life Brooklyn and real life plumbers, and it was just those are the elements that don't work. It adds an absurdism to the film, and if you can kind of just separate from watching this as a Mario film and wanting the what we all know Mario to be, I think it's gonna kind of doom it. But when it comes to the parts that work with this film, the comedic chemistry, the characters, and some of the action sequences, the action put very loosely, but the excitement on screen. It really works more than it doesn't, and that's where I'm kind of coming at with this. But I can't avoid the huge elephant in the room that this is a nightmare of an interpretation of Mario. Quite literally, the mushroom people, the mushroom toadstool, the ruling class, they are Lovecraftian mushroom fungus creatures. They're disgusting to see, but it's kind of funny for that reason.
It's just so absurd.
Yeah,
it's the absurdity of it all. Right.
Absolutely. But very 90s and very plainly not Mario. But remember, this came out before Mario 64. Mario did not have a voice yet.
The concept of Mario was very loose.
Yeah,
it was very broad, and you can really do whatever you want.
Yeah, and interpretations of Mario in pop culture, I think it was Mario 3 in The Wizard, that one really old movie, and we don't really see him. I mean, I guess you have the cartoon and whatnot, but Mario, as we know, it hasn't solidified yet. So I think
it's true.
Taking a different route, it's not the worst thing in the world.
It's true. Yeah. It would, if you made this movie today, it would be a lot more ridiculous,
right?
Because we have an additional 30 years of Mario.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So with the brand not being, definitely Mario was a heavy hitter. I mean, of course, this is a Hollywood movie being made out of after the brand and the property. I still think there is more credit to going in a creative direction while the concrete isn't set just yet. And again, it resulted in clocking this movie much higher than probably anywhere you would see online as a positive review of this, because it is something else to watch. I do not think it was necessarily bad, though. Bottom line, I think watch this movie like any other 90s comedy, and it works more than it has any right working. We will go ahead and give Super Mario Brothers a 53.
Okay, 53.
Yeah.
Nice.
Considering that some of I would say most of reviews for the last 15 years in online discourse for this movie has been total trash. I think that's
I think 53 is more than fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like we should treat it like it's almost an 80 or something like that. Just for the shock value.
Give it a shot. Absolutely. Give it a shot.
That's kind of awesome. I really like that.
Yeah.
I like how something scored a 53 is actually a nice surprise.
I absolutely. It's punching up for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to keep it going then. We're going to do Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and directed by Shane Black. How was it, Vin? We have Robert Downey Jr. and Val Kilmer together.
Mm-hmm. And Michelle, what was her name? Michelle Monaghan?
Again? Monaghan?
Yes,
Monaghan?
yes.
Yeah.
I love her in True Detective. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang basically is a very dark comedy, very fourth wall breaking comedy. Watching this movie, it seriously gave me Deadpool type of vibes off of this. Yeah.
In what way?
Robert Downey Jr. His character is talking to the audience in a fourth wall breaking narrative almost constantly in this film.
Right. Okay.
I think as Shane Black's directorial debut, I think this works. There's definitely a lot of passion in the movie of the type of story he wants to tell and the type of expectations of a murder mystery wrapped up into a dark comedy and what Shane Black wants to get across on screen. It is very self-referential. It is very there's a critique of Hollywood wrapped up into this. You can definitely tell a lot of these concepts were cooking in Shane Black's writing career for some time. So having this as his directorial debut, I think, is a pretty nice match. I was not too hot on this movie, though, because bottom line, there is a lot of Robert Downey Jr. and not particularly the RDJ that we're used to, because this is more of a manic, more of a high-strung type of acting style before he, I think, mellows out a little bit in obviously his Marvel stage.
Right, yeah. This is 2005, so it's a few years before he takes up the Iron Man and kind of that Robert Downey Jr. that we know today.
Yeah, and I think if for I like Robert Downey Jr. I found this to be a little bit annoying, his fourth wall narration. I think this movie is a hard pass if you do not like Robert Downey Jr., because this is like 100% his DNA as far as, him being the main character and whatnot. Also, secret Christmas movie.
Yes, which is always great.
Yes, always on the hunt. Folks at home, if you have any movie that is not billed as a Christmas movie but has the mention of Christmas in it, a tree, lights, a Christmas song, it is a secret Christmas movie. So that is a week.
That's a little bit of a plus, huh?
Yeah, that there's a subcategory to that subgenre of secret Christmas movie. I think the fourth wall breaks are constant in this movie. This is a movie about a criminal that turns into a wannabe actor and then gets involved into a Hollywood elite type of storyline. I think a lot of movies have done this critical look at a inner Hollywood, kind of seeing the cracks since 2005 or whenever this came out. I think a lot of movies kind of that go after this topic really do land in the same spot for me, that I just personally do, as a reviewer, as a watcher, I do not find it overwhelmingly interesting to create a narrative out of like a Hollywood elite. Obviously, this turns into kind of a mystery dark comedy all the way through. I think that's where Shane Black's DNA is really taking over for this story, because he wants to give this story of he wants to tell this gritty inside, look how shitty these people are type of look at Hollywood. And I think that works to an extent. I think for me, though, I have to be self-aware that I just don't care. My level of investment is just not there for these films.
Interesting.
I would say on a higher brow, something like a Hail Caesar, even from the Coen brothers. And it's not grabbing my attention because I just don't really care about it, whether it's a golden age of Hollywood or anything like that. It's just not for me. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. It makes sense completely. That's really interesting, though. That's I don't know how I feel about it personally, to be honest with you. I'd have to think about that. But I have watched movies before, and it's just that feeling of you're sitting there and you're just like, I don't even care about this movie. Like, why do I care about this movie? I've definitely had that before. That
combined with a very heavy-handed narration from Robert Downey Jr., very fourth wall breaking type of writing, and I think what tops it all off, and unfortunately in a little bit of a bad way for me, is all of it is very Shane Black style. This is more his crass and his kind of dirty jokes, or his kind of boundary breaking, trying to intentionally cross a line type of jokes that you see in his earlier writing. It has less heart than what we see in something like Nice Guys, which I am a huge fan of.
Right, which is another duo.
Right.
Another male focused duo.
Absolutely. So when it comes to some of the development there for Shane Black's writing and his directing style, I think this definitely feels like an earlier work. And I note it because watching this in 2021, while I was not against any of the jokes or anything like that, some are very funny, some are self-referential within the movie itself. It is something that I just don't think is going to age well. You give this another 5 years, I think this is... Yeah.
Wow.
I think this is ripe for canceling, if I'm being honest.
Wow, okay. If people care about it that much.
Right. Who really cares?
Yeah.
It's a dark comedy from 2005.
Yeah. This has always been... Everyone has heard of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang though before. Everyone's like aware of this film. It usually gets mild praise, I would say. So any redeeming qualities with Val Kilmer? Did he save it at all?
I think Val Kilmer encompasses some of that crass humor.
Okay, sure.
So I liked him on screen. I certainly want to see more with Val now that he has some medical problems.
Right.
And, I think that's good to return to the work while the actor is still alive. I think the truth of the matter is Robert Downey Jr. just takes such a front and center presence both on screen and then with the narration on top of it. He's consuming a large amount of the pie.
Right.
And he's not necessarily sharing the screen time. Granted, he's the main character here, so that's fine. But I think, again, it's our DJ's show, and I think if you're not a fan of that, then that's going to be a hard pass.
Wow. Okay, that's real. That's interesting. I wasn't expecting you to be almost annoyed by Robert Downey Jr.
I think for me, and as someone that likes him, if I got a little bit of a sense that, okay, all right, let's keep it moving, what I mean?
Yeah, that's saying something then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I need to take it a step back and realize, wow, this really may not be for someone that hates Robert Downey Jr.
or
and
it's
his
just
manic delivery. And,
right, or it doesn't actively hate or like, just as with him.
Exactly,
like
exactly. Yeah. Most of all, where the movie falls short is kind of development and arcs. Has all the manic moments and the clumsy comedy and the clumsy action that you would see in The Nice Guys. So it's there. And really, I was primed to love this film because when I see that all play out, it reminds me of what I love so much about The Nice Guys. But it was interesting because if you look at the type of comedy writing and mixed in with action in The Nice Guys, it's always paid off with heart. There's a heartfelt moment following it up. Because of the fourth wall, very meta-narrative in this movie, every single moment is played off with a joke or a fourth wall break from Robert Downey Jr. And I think it just plain loses my interest because we have these, pretty, maybe not identical, but very similar type of clumsy action playing into comedic moments.
Right, yeah.
Almost to a T, what Shane Black crafts to work in what I think is probably his best movie. What the payoff isn't there. What's missing out of the formula is that there's no kind of bringing it home. There's no heart to it. It's all played for a joke, and all of it comes off much more cheap for that reason. Not necessarily bad, because again, it probably gets 2/3 of what works in that formula right, but it does not bring it home for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense, though. Yeah.
I think this movie is definitely a recommend. Let me give some perspective to the other side. Definitely a recommend if you absolutely cannot get enough of Robert Downey Jr., maybe if you watched Doolittle or something like that, and you need some more. This is much earlier in his career. I was interested in possibly diving into some more works around his career, like Chaplin and whatnot.
Sure,
he got some Oscar nod for. I think the mix of self-aware, fourth wall breaking wasn't exactly in the mood for that. I just was not too hot on this one. I don't necessarily think it is a bad movie. I just don't think it is anything that you really need to be crawling and finding time.
It lacks importance almost.
Yeah, lacks heart, lacks punch for that reason. And more than anything, I think the style of comedy is going to seriously hurt future watchings on this.
Interesting.
And again, I can't stress enough, not that I have any problem with the type of comedy that's there. I just think the mix of everything without that heart is going to kind of damn this film a little bit for future watchings. Other than that, lukewarm. Certainly, I know Shane Black has done better. I am excited to maybe see more of his filmography, excited to dive into more of Robert Downey Jr.'s performances earlier on in his career, at least for this one. Not too hot coming out of the gate. We're going to go ahead and give Kiss Kiss Bang Bang a 57.
Okay, 57. That makes sense with how you were talking about it. I would say I think it makes a lot of sense in the fact of how you said, you're like, it's not a bad movie. It's not necessarily bad. It's just not doing much for me. It kind of like, in the 50s, that kind of makes sense then.
Yeah. And it feels very early 2000s as well. I just think it dates itself.
Now, if you do love a Robert Downey Jr. and you love him being him, then...
And maybe a little bit more unhinged as well, less Marvel safe,
Yeah. I think that, I'm a little surprised at that, to be honest with you. I was definitely expected to be higher.
We definitely hit on the madness. Folks at home, we always like to look at these scores from a bird's eye after a little bit of time, and this definitely hits that same madness within one episode that Super Mario Brothers is 4 points away from Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It's perfect, and listen, that's what I'm saying. Equally in the same category of worth your time.
Oh, that's funny.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Let's keep it going. It's kind of funny. We're doing some duo movies here. You got Mario and Luigi.
Oh.
Then you have the two in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and then you have the two in our next movie here. Let's just move on to Moneyball, directed by Bennett Miller, and we have Brad Pitt. Jonah Hill, another little duo. How did this fare?
Philip Seymour Hoffman as well in there for a little bit.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Plays an excellent role. I always like seeing him on screen.
Yeah.
Moneyball, this, of course, is a sports type of not biopic, but telling the story of a professional in the sports management of a baseball team, all historical events, and basically telling the story of approaching the procurement of new players, turning a season around, and the pressures of the immense amount of money it takes to sign on your ball players. And maybe going about it in a different way. This is encapsulated very much in the film's mantra that if we play like the Yankees, we're going to lose to the Yankees.
Right.
This is the director of Foxcatcher and Capote, and I would feel comfortable in calling this definitely the birth of the financial flick, as Michael Lewis, the author of Moneyball, book-wise, is also the author of The Big Short, and I think really cracked the seal for entertaining economics on screen.
Sure. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah,
I never really thought about that quite like that before.
Yeah, and I think definitely cracked some of wanting to take his books, his kind of digestible economics, entertaining economics, and putting that on screen. I think this definitely cracked it. Technically, there might be some others now, come to think of it, now that I'm talking about it. But I think Moneyball definitely cracked that because of its award season nods, and definitely the star of the show being Brad Pitt. I think, thank God, Brad Pitt is in this because it's the first quarter of this film is really not the most engaging, and I'll be 100% honest here, folks. Tom is well aware that I'm maybe not the biggest sports fan. I'm not the biggest baseball fan specifically, so maybe some of the initial draw that there may be for the historical context of this team getting to the finals and then losing and then having to recover after that loss for a year. Where do you go? I think there is some real enjoyment for the sports doc side of that to understand the historical significance of these players in their career. This is going, I forget actually what year this takes place in the film. But regardless, as far as what we're looking at there is some enjoyment in that first half. I think for maybe those audience members that don't know the historical significance of these teams and these players moving from team to team, I think Brad Pitt saves the show because otherwise I think it would be pretty boring. And that definitely showing some personal bias to the subject matter in this. I do think this ties into my main criticism in the film, which we'll get into just a moment then. So even supporting cast, though, like Jonah Hill, Jonah's really not great in this. I don't think
this...
this...
he brings it down a bit, does he?
Yeah, this is before he found his Wolf of Wall Street magic that he's really jiving with the other side.
Yeah, he's come out with this slew... I don't know about slew, but a decent number of movies where it's like, oh, he's got some chops.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's just kind of playing a nerd in this. Obviously, this being historical, there maybe needs to be a seriousness or some brackets to what the actor can do. And maybe that's in the appreciation of what they're doing on screen. I think it does little to create a volley on screen between Brad and Jonah, and definitely Jonah with anyone else as well.
Oh, okay.
Brad is the
he's really holding it, and it's a shame that he doesn't have anyone else to work with to have that his level back and forth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for Jonah Hill being the main supporting cast to both the story and the scenes that were shown on screen, it was a little bit disappointing because there's almost no moment in this film that I say, wow, that was some great acting. It's all almost just like Brad tossing him balls and then it not being tossed back.
So it's very much just Jonah Hill just playing a bit of a numbers guy.
Nerd. Yeah, and felt very one note for that reason.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And again, maybe I wouldn't criticize that if it wasn't something Oscar nominated, if it wasn't something that was so revered in the last couple of years, and definitely again the start of these type of financial flicks that have come about. But that's just for me. As you progress through the film, though, you add in Philip Seymour Hoffman, you add in a young Chris Pratt. Slowly it becomes more engaging, and from there, the traction of the plot as well, the breakthrough in the approach of how they're procuring players, how the story is unfolding to craft a team in a very new way, it slowly becomes much more engaging in a very good way. I would say, as a little bit of a knock, I would say this lead up period, it really doesn't reach that full gallop until 120 minutes in. And if anything, I would consider it more of a solid movie than a great movie for that reason, just because there's so much time of build up. And again, the appreciation there for baseball fans, I have no doubt that there's this historical significance of these teams, these players, the professionals they're referencing. For me, though, that felt like just very slow build up. I obviously knew when they were calling to someone because, the camera hangs, they say first and last name, but it took a while for the film to reach a full gallop. I think once it hits that full gallop, dialogue is a serious highlight. It sounds odd in parts, but it sets a very realistic tone.
Okay.
Especially when you have Brad Pitt in the room with a planning committee of old baseball heads, and he has to kind of rock their thinking of how this is done and what they're going after. I think Brad Pitt is a perfect antagonizer in those moments.
Okay. He's
almost playing a similar kind of Fight Club role, if you will, but obviously toned into the baseball world. He is an aggressor. He's trying to shake things up, and I think that's probably the most enjoyable beats of it. That's present in that first hour and 20 minutes for sure. I think once again, it just does not hit home until that hour and 20 mark, which was a little bit tough for me. As I want to focus as a criticism, I want to convey that the cinematography is good, but it hits on a classic area for me that I don't feel like it matches the script, and I don't find it striking to assist the script. This is what I was referring to before, that I'm surprised that I was not more engaged. If the cinematography, if the shots on screen are going to portray a mood, a feeling, be matched with the script, and be matched with what we as an audience member are walking away with, above all else, I think I mentioned it on a previous episode, it comes down to a very simple question for me. Why are we seeing this interpreted as a motion picture on screen versus any other art form, where clearly this was a book already?
Right.
I don't find the cinematography in this very engaging. I find it very safe by the books. And for me, especially if I'm going to consider something as an Oscar film, that if we're going to have actors on screen and given a platform to act, we need to have that information, have those moments presented creatively.
So it was not to use the same phrase, but one note kind of, just like you said about Jonah's acting. My thing was it, if it didn't get the Oscar buzz, would you be looking at it more fondly? Are you not, because you can't knock it because of critics found it to be a certain way.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But were you actually sitting there? Were you sitting there saying, why did the cinematography get critically reviewed or just well received when it's really nothing?
Sure.
And it's middle of the road? Or were you sitting there thinking, there's something up with the cinematography being boring. It's ruining. There's so much more excitement that it could be bringing in. It's not. was that kind of where you were at?
Absolutely. It's always in the observation guide. I really, other than maybe some research projects and whatnot, and diving into directors or specific talent, I always try to just observe the film.
Right.
What is the film giving me?
Yeah,
What is coming
Good.
at me? And when I notice that in the very clearly scenes set up to be an acting platform for Brad Pitt, when those are not presented engagingly, that now triggers me. Let me see who the cinematographer on this.
Right.
Cinematographer on this is Wally Pfister, and surprisingly, he did The Dark Knight, among many others. So once again, now that as a criticism is leaving me scratching my head a little bit, something that I'm looking into more after the film and after this, but that's more so the evidence to my initial observation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's a shame that while you're sitting there, when something doesn't click with the way a film is shot, it sucks kind of because you have something where it could. You really could be bumping it up a couple notches. The movie could be hitting on multiple levels, and for it to for the cinematography to be lacking, it's it's a shame. It's just a shame. Yeah,
absolutely, and it's just. It doesn't detract from the script. It doesn't detract from the performances, but it certainly doesn't add to it. Where
it detracts from the overall picture, though.
Exactly.
From the motion picture. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's a really big thing for me, because if this movie is going to be the dialogue and going to be the performances and, the historical significance of the story, all of that needs to be interconnected to why is this a movie? Why are we making this a movie versus a sports documentary or something like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's where I kind of land with that. I think overall, though, there are basically kind of three spheres of enjoyment for this movie. We have the baseball side, the statistics, economic side, and then the drama. I think, the baseball... very fair. I don't have the largest appreciation for, especially for the insider player trading, hearing names in the script.
You're kind of new to. You're kind of hearing it for the first time.
Exactly.
Right.
So I don't maybe have an appreciation for that, but I can also recognize it as good, as a lot of care being put into the callbacks for this jumping forward or jumping back rather, and maybe having some audience members to say, "Oh wow, that's right, he was on that team before he went to the." I mean,
that kind of fun stuff, and I don't want to say Easter eggy, but yeah.
I think it does play beyond Easter eggs, to be fair, though, because it does play into the stakes of what they're up against, that they're losing serious players,
right,
and they're in a crisis mode after coming so close to victory. So when it comes to the stats, the economic side of it, I really like that as a topic. I think it works here, and I can say the best moments of the film are when the brazenness, the stubbornness of Brad Pitt's character is now backed up by stats, is now backed up by the science of it. I think that is very entertaining to watch, because he's got something in his sleeve then.
Right. So did it feel like you're on a journey with Brad Pitt? Does it kind of just feel like you're hanging out with Brad Pitt in the movie and you're rooting for him? He's become kind of your friend, right? And you're just on this journey with him.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of how? Okay.
Absolutely. But as far as that last kind of area of enjoyment that I think you can kind of approach this film with is the drama, and unfortunately I think that's where I can take or leave it. There's more exciting done with Philip Seymour Hoffman's character as a side character with a plot line of a contract dispute, more done in the drama of that than Brad Pitt's character. I think the drama that is interwoven to what may be driving him towards fighting the forces around him to do something drastic, it just did not land. I think it's a shame, because I think a balancing act of a movie like this needs to have some salt and pepper to it. It needs to have some personal engagement. Why is this character so compelled? Why are we pushing this here? We talked about it not too long ago, but King Richard. What are the forces beyond the conflict we see on screen? What are the forces behind the forces? I think it falls a little short, and especially where the ending of this film, no spoilers of course, but ties in so much to what events of our character's life led to his decision-making process, I think it just ends a little weak for me. But that in combination with the cinematography and creating kind of a question in my head of a lackluster portrayal of the drama, not necessarily the drama itself, but portrayal of the drama, I think that has me a little bit torn on this one. I cannot deny, though, there are a lot of great performances on screen. I think the story is dynamite, and again, once you step into the appreciation of the fun statistics, the fun economics behind this, in combination with baseball, that so many people can have an appreciation for, I think it does work. I just would not call this a must-watch or something that you need to race for.
Right, yeah.
So, with that said, we are going to go ahead and give Moneyball a 66.
Okay, yeah, 66 is pretty good. It's a pretty good score still. People have to realize, again, we'll just reiterate sometimes, just that, with our ratings, we're not like some of the other ratings where Rotten Tomatoes gives out, hundreds and 95s like they're candy sometimes. And it's kind of ridiculous how, it's a movie has to be quite good to crack the 80s, and it has to be one of the best films ever to be a 90. You know what I mean? Like, Godfather 2 has a 95. It's our highest rated because, what we're saying is there's only 5% wrong. That movie only has an issue like 5% of the time, which is nothing.
Sure.
Which is almost nothing. But
Right.
the fact is, we can't go and rate it a 100 because what if tomorrow another movie comes out that's better? It's just like, how do you actually justify that?
And
So-
even approaching it from the rating side, what is worth your time?
Right,
practically speaking.
And that's why that's why I say 66 is actually a pretty good score because good movies go in the 60 category.
Absolutely.
When you go look at the other guys, and 60 is automatically. So many people live when you go on Rotten Tomatoes or I don't know IMDb or something like that, it's ridiculous because anything below a 75, it's almost like not worth your time or below 70, and that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit more I don't know what you call it. We're a little bit more realistic in just films and saying this is a good movie.
Yeah, I think the criticism has to examine everything that every other critic looks at, but the difference here is that all these movies are in the ballpark of the same amount of time that you would invest into it. How much of that time is really worth spending with this movie?
Yeah. So 66 is still a pretty damn good score. And what were you saying? I was kind of in my head, I was like, I think he's going to go for 65 on this one. The way you were saying, because the story's good and everything like that. There is mostly good acting, besides maybe the Jonah Hill.
Right.
And then so 65, I think or 66, that's a great score, really, for that film. And that brings it down from kind of that hype that it has gotten. And I don't know why. I don't understand why it got so much hype at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because the book did really well, and then you have Brad Pitt starring in it. It was a big, you know what I mean?
And it's the first of these type of flicks. I think that's a perfect example of we're watching in the here and now. Maybe this is not one of the best of the author's interpretation, you know what I mean? Or adaptations of his books. So,
but no surprise that Brad Pitt kind of carries it through. Brad Pitt can be so wonderful to watch on screen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's Moneyball, folks. Let's keep it going now to a 2021 release, but it's kind of out of theaters now. This came out about 6 months ago, and this is Demonic.
Yes. So missed the buck on this one. Would have liked to covered it. Tying once again into what's worth your time. I don't think anyone was seeing this film in theaters, so we may have not had a really good approach to saving you some time if it's something bad, and unfortunately, I will lean into the fact that this is not great. Demonic is a movie about a mother in a coma that her daughter is estranged with her, and they need to connect them over a virtual world, an experimental virtual kind of reality hangout space. The director, of course, is Neil Blomkamp, and back after years of working not in a mainline production, but with his side project of Oats Studio. I think Oats Studio has been doing some interesting sci-fi stuff as far as short films and sci-fi technology, or not sci-fi technology, but technology in telling sci-fi stories through film. And I think he some of what we see out of Oates hits that magic that we see in Blomkamp's earlier work, like District 9 and a little bit in Chappie. But this film, now a feature-length film, that he's finally taking a stab at feature-length films once again. It falls short, and I think it definitely falls short because it is not concerned with any of what Blomkamp's usual brand is in this socio-economic spin that District 9 is absolutely known for. Chappie is absolutely known for. Elysium,
it's very, and like you just want to give another shout out to Ode Studio there.
Yes.
If people go and check out Ode Studio, go to the website, this guy has a feel. This guy has a DNA about him, and switching that DNA and completely like going into something completely different. I mean, we're going from that District 9 and Chappie kind of, which is, it just has that feel. They're very similar in ways, and a lot of like Oat Studio stuff is very similar.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very down the line. This is what these people do. To go from that to like a horror sci-fi type thing or horror drama as well, it's strange. It's a little strange.
It is very strange, and the technology driving this, maybe why this team tackled this, is this virtual world. The virtual world is kind of stylized as a dream world and is presented as kind of a low-res mocapping. It is the look of it, the actual fidelity of the graphics on screen of this digital interpretation of our main characters is intentionally low res and stylized in some ways. I would like to think Blomkamp looked at this much like he probably looked at a lot of what he did with Wetaworks and prop technology and whatnot, and said, this is exciting, I want to work with this in a story. Unfortunately, I cannot shake the feel that this was a COVID baby. This was a lot of small set production, and I don't know. I would challenge anyone to look at this film, and this is almost like textbook case for how those type of films look, and in a low end.
Okay, sure.
So I think there could be some normal inspiration for how Blomkamp would approach a story like that. A little bit of the history with this is that it was on my radar because I really do like him as a director and a sci-fi director.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can definitely be categorized as sci-fi horror. Comes out and is critically panned. I think this may be one of the most panned movies in 2021.
Okay.
I then give it a shot around October for what we're looking into, Halloween movies and whatnot. And once again, I have a rude awakening that this film is not what I think it is, and really quite one note and schlocky and kind of just straight up bad, which I really am sad to say, because I think Blomkamp is one of those that can inspire a very interesting look on screen, and that is always to grab my attention, to look at a design team and the passion they put into something that is overall just a set dressing for what the story is taking place in, but there was such a creative approach to the technology in his films. I feel this is the virtual world that is produced in this. It's used a handful of times. It certainly looks a certain way. On top of that, I don't think it looks good either. It's stylized, but I don't think it looks good.
Not in a good way, what we're used to for him.
And it's certainly not used in a thematic way where... again, not the best movie, but a Chappie. It has a story to the robot.
Yeah.
It has, this socioeconomic kind of approach that he says, there's a story in the society around the technology. District 9, of course, that being the aliens and the weapons in that. There's nothing to it there. It's just they have to use this. This is a vehicle to get in the mother's mind, basically.
That is pretty disappointing.
Yeah. And believe me, I wish there was a symbolic reason or anything like that. I really was digging deep. I was paying attention, folks. I just don't think there's anything there. So the cast is a lot of no names, and while performances are passable, there's really nothing special here. Once again, combine that with a particularly bad script in the final act. I mean, the final act has a wild script.
Wow. He wrote it too, by the way.
Did he?
Yeah. That's weird. It's very strange.
Yeah.
It's just like we're just used to him. We're used to him up to a certain standard, I guess.
Yeah. And definitely I'll even say as a bias, rooting for him too.
Oh, absolutely.
I think what he does with amateur, well, not amateur film, but more shorter film projects with Oates, I love
like
that.
lower budget. What can you do on a lower budget? It's great.
Yeah.
And again, people check out Oates Studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish maybe he took this time and gathered maybe 2 or 3 interesting technologies in film production and added them into it instead of this one-note thing.
Sure.
And again, it especially just goes nowhere. I will say, if there's anything cementing this score, it is that final act, though, because in addition to a bad script, in addition to some twists that make absolutely no sense and have no thematic tie to it either, it results in a pretty bad experience. And even if you were appreciating the virtual world and the approach to it, as kind of rough as it looks, it is stylized. Even if you were engaged with that, that goes nowhere, and then it really turns into kind of a sour experience at the very end for the type of twist it tries to put in front of the audience, and then more importantly, what the script does with some of the lines. It's just cheesy lines. They come out of nowhere. I mean, it'd be one thing if it was in the film earlier on, but it just like slaps you out of nowhere. I forget what was the one line, but I was just like, what? It's not good. But overall, boring. And not because there's lack of scares, it's lack of theming. It's lack of engagement.
Wow, okay,
There's lack of follow-through, there's lack of tying, and the tech, the horror, the drama, none of it connects in a meaningful way. I would compare this to something like The Night House, where that's very much still slow, but it is oozing connective threads that keep you engaged throughout the film and make the scares hit home. If you're going to go with something slower paced like this, the scares have to mean something for the characters.
It's got to be worth it.
Exactly.
If we're hanging around, you got to give us something.
Exactly. And I mean, this was just not worth it on, unfortunately, so many levels.
Sounds like all the levels.
Yeah. Neil, I can't stress enough, rooting for you for the next one, for the next feature length, and hopefully just a kind of a victim of a rough production schedule with COVID. We're going to go ahead and give Demonic a 24.
Ooh, yeah. Stinker. Yeah. That's a big shame. You're probably, just because when you see him in a project like that, you just assume it's going to just be at a certain standard.
Absolutely.
And it seems like it was lacking everywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
sometimes you can pull actors out of nowhere. District 9, what they did with the actors and everything like that, it was a relative obscurity for the majority of the cast, for the most part,
Yeah.
And but boy, you got to do it right. Mm-hmm. You got to do it right in order if it's going to work.
Yeah. I think it's the classic balancing act that it has to be script and performance, and neither are here.
Yeah, that's a shame. All right, so 24 for Demonic. Yeah, that's a shame, but we'll leave that there. And before we go on, we have one more movie, folks, and that's the one that's kind of just released now playing. But before that, as you know, we're going to take our break here and do our producer segment. We just want to remind everybody, we are going off the value for value model here. So Vin and I host the show. You all help produce the show monetarily. And basically, you can get an actual producer credit. Go to the dailyratings.com and go to the donations tab. And the idea is, if you are finding value from the podcast and our website, could you give us back some value through a donation? And you can donate whatever amount you want. You could set up for a weekly, a monthly, something like that, or a one-time. It's really whatever you want. You can also put in a note and be anonymous if you want also. But when you donate, we'll read your note on air, and you can say anything you want to us. You can be as harsh. You can say,
believe it. You
don't have to praise us. Right.
Recommend Super Mario Brothers out of 53.
It's true. You can hate us so much that it's like, I'm going to give them money just so I can get my voice heard.
Yeah, that's fine.
And exactly. But the whole idea of it is, we're staying away from the corporate sponsors and everything like that. And basically, it's a direct line to you all, So if we're not seeing anything coming our way, kind of, if the producership is low, we know something's not right. We need to kind of, do something different, mix it up a little bit. And we know, hey, we're just doing film reviews here. It's not that all important. And that's why it's just something little. If you would, just stop by dailyratings.com, donations tab. We appreciate it so much. And with that, we'll move on now to our last film. We're going to do the now playing film. It's Spencer, directed by Pablo Larraín, and then we have Kristen Stewart being talked up quite a lot on this one.
Yes.
Quite a lot. And what did we get? Was it just a Kristen Stewart show, or was there more depth to it than that?
It's definitely Kristen Stewart's show, which is good, and I think she's doing a good job. You hit the nail on the head, though, because this landed on my radar, not because I follow the director, not because I'm too interested in Princess Diana as a subject, but it was something that there was getting a lot of pre-award season buzz for Kristen Stewart's performance. I had no attachment to this director. This is the director from that did Jackie, and once again, kind of up to bat to tell another female lead biopic, which I think was an interesting matching. He's done some other works in between, but that's what jumped out to me for his filmography. That I think these films probably could be, sisters in that kind of capacity.
Right.
This is a film. I think it's very important to note that this is a fictional imagining of a period in time between some public fallout with Princess Diana and the royal family, and basically kind of a blackout period with the media, where otherwise the media almost had a finger on the heartbeat of every move of Princess Diana at this time. So it's kind of an imagining of what's going on in Diana's head during this time. I think for me, as far as Kristen Stewart, I mean, we've talked about in the past. Not a fan of her at all. I don't think she's done the. I like her.
I really don't like her in most of her performances, right. And yet I continue to be. It's like, oh, Kristen Stewart's in it. Like, I get excited.
Yeah, and I think for me, while I may have not seen her do a similar kind of platform jump to a more serious actor like we see with Robert Pattinson, I think they're bound to be compared to each other as far as the acting in Twilight and then where they are now.
Yeah, sure.
I am always a fan of giving actors a shot, especially when they are going for a more dramatic role. This may have not been a movie that I would see unless it was Kristen Stewart having a turnaround moment in her career. I would compare this very much to a Dallas Buyers Club or True Detective for McConaughey, in that I think we have finally a moment where there's some method acting approach that's coming into play. There is a lot of appreciation towards habits and body language in the performance. And in that sense, I think Stewart does a pretty great job as Princess Diana. There is certainly a very, very conscious approach to mannerisms with this. Head movements.
Was she overdoing it?
Tough for me to say. Historically, that is.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm not really a Royals fan, or what I mean.
No, that's fine. But more so when you're sitting there and watching the movie, is it on your mind where it just seems like some people just, you take Kate Blanchett and she can just play a character and she can kind of do it to the nines and it comes off as really natural. With Kristen Stewart doing this, did it come across as at least what she was doing was natural? I
think in parts. I think where it shows the Diana we know to be a loving mother, for instance, her interaction with her children, I think that's where it works. It's actually the fictional elements that maybe pushes that boundary. I still think it works. I still think it's not trying too hard. But I could definitely see where historical fans of Diana and of the royal family, if this is your jam, man, I think that this film could be upsetting for a lot of reasons. A lot of this portrayal kind of portrays Diana as a nut job, which I don't think is the case. The research after the fact with this one is that this is absolutely a fictional approach to those couple days before her split up with her husband. I forget, is it Charles or William? I think it's Charles. Again, I'm not we're not paying attention to Buckingham.
Right.
But there's a lot there that is done psychologically. There are a lot of surreal segments in this film, and for me, who has no appreciation for the truth or how Diana really was, I enjoyed that. I could very well easily say that could make people hate this film because I think it does make her look a little bit like a nut job. I think it is a little unfair and maybe even mean-spirited in how it portrays the pressures of high society and how she's dealing with that maybe internally. And the bottom line is it's definitely not a nonfiction approach because we have no idea what goes behind closed doors. And the film actually has a healthy distance to that because they're not naming a lot of people by first and last name, probably over maybe some fear of slander or legal action from, something so delicate as the royal family, because there are definitely some villains casted within the royal family in this film to create the drama within this Christmas type of stretch of the royal family and what's going on there. So
Okay.
I think with that portrayal, again, it works for me. I think it's important to note that the imagining of what happens in this time is by no means factual, but I think where that drama, that fictional approach, and that very surreal approach to Diana's mind and what the type of pressure she's going under, and how she's dealing with that with a little bit of rebellion within the royal family, with the little that she can do, it is matched so well with the cinematography. This is total opposite end of the spectrum to what I commented on with Moneyball just in this very episode, folks. The cinematography here is a huge highlight because it is very close. It is very paranoid, and I think it is just such a perfect match for the type of panic we probably have all experienced when we have a family obligation we don't want to do. We're in the bathroom, we're taking our time, it takes that, and it really does match it so perfectly because shots are very close to Kristen Stewart in her performance, and I once again, not only being a thematic pairing of why are we seeing this on screen, it does hit the bar or hit the mark on giving Stewart a wonderful platform for acting and showing off this approach to method acting.
So, the cinematography is very complementary
Yes.
to the depth of it and the feeling, the emotion they're trying to get across, and just because it's so about her.
Yes,
right?
so about her.
Yeah.
And so about the madness that the pressure, the familial pressure that she's feeling of high society and the royals. That drama, especially because that's the fictional element right there.
Right.
Her kind of going a little mad because of that. I think it's sold only because of the cinematography, and that's a really big highlight for that reason, because otherwise I think there would be a lot of gripes with this film. Kristen Stewart would probably still be doing the same approach and same acting style, so I think the merits would be there, but I think the film would be much worse because it would be this almost jarring fictional approach to what I think a lot of people know Diana not to be a nutcase.
Right, right.
Very loving, very giving person. So, and again, that's me coming from even a sidelines approach of this, but regardless, definitely a highlight there. I think as a glimpse into the pressures of high society, that is what this film aims for, in telling this imagining of this short stretch of time that basically results in Diana falling out with the family, but it doesn't quite land. The interactions in this film are so small scale. We're talking about Buckingham Palace here. There are no moments that Kristen Stewart is given a good... Well, maybe I shouldn't say no moments. There is one. But there are very few moments that she is given a volley back and forth with who we actually care about. Instead, the roles that are paired with Diana in this story are that of the workers.
They're very small. They're very minute characters in the whole story.
Yeah, and while definitely there in the script to show that Diana, she is not one of these. She is one of, she wants to be normal.
Sure,
She does not want the high society. If anything, the high society is making her sick.
Right.
So I get where that's positioned, but it's a little bit of a letdown when the buildup, no less probably the antagonist of your story, is something so big as the royal family, and we're not seeing that across the table, or we're not seeing that in dynamic scenes of conflict. Instead, we are left to some time skips, some jumps around what you think would be the most important and the most engaging moments that the script even builds up, and then we jump past a period in dinner, and she's now back in the bathroom and alone. Once again, good for Stewart's acting. We're really hyper-focused on her performance, and she's given a huge platform. I think it's good for the story it's trying to tell. I think it's a pretty big letdown to think that the royal family, not only as the antagonist in this, but kind of what you expect out of an Oscar Beatty kind of film. Like, you want, the glimpse into the high society, the period piece. It's not there. Scenes will be built up. Characters will be referenced. We don't see them at all. And it's not only that, it's because of a jump around in the film.
So it's very purposely done to keep her isolated. It's this feeling of complete isolation, which I'm sure was the whole point behind it, but you're wishing that you were getting some more on screen. Yeah.
I think my observation is that it definitely fits with the message the film is trying to convey. Definitely the feeling of paranoia that the film is trying to convey with how she's interacting with royals. But it doesn't necessarily translate to a good film to watch. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Exactly. I think this film could have been a knockout if we had all of this put forward. Maybe take some of the side plots out of the way with the workers of the family and the guards and assistants and chefs and whatnot. Tone that back a little bit, because you really don't need to drive that home so much that she has this connection with the lower versus the higher in society, and instead replace that with some really dynamic scenes with Charles, with the Queen, and show them as this menacing portrait that this film is trying to convey. Not saying that that's the truth or whatever, but
and then you could get that like what you were saying, that volleying you could get with Stewart and another big name actor or something like that.
Absolutely. The one sequence that I refer to there is one good back and forth with Charles and I forget the actor's name. I don't think he's super big time. But there's one decent sequence that there is a back and forth with these characters that is far and few between in this film. And if it had more of that, I think this film goes from, okay, that's an interesting kind of fictional approach, showing the madness of that high-pressure society, to show that high-pressure society, show that antagonistic force. I think this film goes into a must-watch. But without that, it feels oddly small scale for such a large scale subject matter. Does that make sense?
And large scale performance by our single. Yeah,
exactly.
I think that does make sense. Yeah.
But that really is where my main criticism lies, because as an appreciation of this being an artistic fictional approach to what a character could be going through internally behind the lens of the media that we would know her from, I think it was very interesting. I think Stewart does a great job, and I'm excited to see some of the recognition she can get come award season for this. However, I think there's a serious loss in if the conflict is going to be sold by our quote unquote villains on screen, or the forces against Diana on screen. We just don't plain see them on screen enough.
And what it's coming out to be, it sounds like everyone is going to remember Kristen Stewart having a great performance in this film. No one's going to remember the film itself.
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like.
And I think maybe a third is that you'll probably get some outrage from people that love the royal family in the portrayal of how evil they are in this film.
There's always going to be.
Yeah. So, but I've as maybe not an appreciator of that, but still kind of knowing some of the history, I thought it was done pretty well. And again, a particular good matching with the cinematography for the message and the feeling it's trying to convey. Just kind of fall short in the scale. And once again, had my head scratching a little bit over, is this a COVID production? You never know. I can't wait until I don't have to ask that question on viewing something.
Absolutely. It's going to be nice to be out of that.
Absolutely. So, with that said, excited to see what Stewart has to get recognized for come award season. We're going to go ahead and give Spencer a 68.
Okay, yeah. 68, once again, a good movie. And just like you said, if it had a little bit more, if the movie was a little bit bigger, maybe we could say, I could see how it could be bumped up a decent amount, put it in that must-watch.
And I will always tie it back to, a lot of what we talk about as far as the criticism here ties into what a normal review is, which the objective of that is how good is this movie? Again, my objective here is how worth your time is this movie. And I think this is an above-average watch, verging on a very good watch, but does not crack something that I think everyone needs to be racing to see.
Yeah, definitely. But when it comes to it's and it sounds like it's a Kristen Stewart movie is what it comes down to be.
Which hey, I mean, if we've been talking about Oscar bait a lot, I've completely failed in trying to avoid that terminology. So, I think it's there for her, and I think if this is a platform very similar to McConaughey, that we have a turnaround moment, I'm
we'll
excited.
see
I'm
about
rooting
that.
for her.
And we'll see about that. I don't know if I necessarily agree with. I would be interested to see the past 10 years of her work and go back because she does so many indie stuff and she's a little bit lower radar.
Very true.
It'd be interesting to actually see some of her performances as well. Where McConaughey came out and rebranded, a purposeful rebrand. It took himself out of an entire genre, came back for something. Yeah. It'd be interesting to actually go back in the past decade, kind of. Mm-hmm. But awesome. Yeah, I think good for her. Like you said, it's going to be good for her in this upcoming award season. I think a lot of talk with her and maybe even Lady Gaga on House of Gucci, basically. It's going to come down to,
of course.
Two really great performances this year in film. Okay, Vin, is there anything else you'd like to add here, or are we going to be rolling credits?
No, I think that's good. Excited to see maybe and get ahead of the ball on some of this award season chatter around films. So hopefully we can hit the mark and be on the same page as the Academy. If not, when is any viewer on the same page as the Academy?
That's exactly right. That is for sure. I almost don't want to be on the page of the
exactly
with those folks over there. But all right, Vin, we appreciate you stopping by. We'll see you next week. And as for you folks here, we'll go over the movies just one more time. We have the Super Mario Brother movie with a 53%, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang with a 57%, Moneyball with a 66%, Demonic with a 24%, and we have Spencer rounding things out here with a 68%. We thank you so much, folks, for producing, for listening, and we will see you next week on the Daily Ratings. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com, and you can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from our product. You'll get a producer mention on the next podcast episode, too. We're going to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from all those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.